You need to watch this if you crave chills down your spine. Welcome to Soul Studios. Here, true crime meets the unknown. Suspense lurks in every shadow, and supernatural forces whisper from the dark. We craft chilling, edge-of-your-seat short stories inspired by the eerie, the unexplained, and the most haunting mysteries. 3 new stories drop every week, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to step inside? Subscribe now before the next story finds you.
In the early 1920s, a quiet Bavarian farmhouse became the setting for one of Europe's most haunting mysteries. Neighbors noticed strange footprints in the snow, noises in the attic, and lights glowing when the family should have been asleep. Then, without warning, the farm went silent. Days passed with no word, no visits to church, and an unease that spread through the village. When neighbors finally entered, they uncovered a mystery so chilling that, even today, no one can explain what truly happened inside those walls. A century later, Hinterkaifeck remains an unsolved riddle, one that blurs the line between human evil and something far darker. If you crave chilling stories where history and horror intertwine, subscribe to Soul Studios and hit the bell icon, because your next nightmare is only one click away. Imagine a lonely farmhouse hidden in the Bavarian woods, where something truly evil unfolded. It was March 1922, and on the 31st of March, 6 people went to bed in Hinterkaifeck, a remote farmstead north of Munich, but only 5 would wake up. By dawn, the house was a scene of horror and confusion. Neighbors would soon learn that not only were Andreas Gruber, 63, and his wife Cecilia, 72, dead, but their daughter Victoria, her 2 children, 7-year-old Cecilia and 2-year-old Joseph, and the family maid Maria Baumgartner, 44, had also been slaughtered. To make matters even stranger, the killer never ran away. Instead, for 3 days, he stayed in the house with the bodies, feeding the chickens, tending the fire, even eating meals from the pantry. How could a crime this brutal come with a twist this chilling? Hinterkaifeck wasn't a town at all, but a lone farm hidden behind the hamlet of Kaifeck, about a mile north of it and surrounded by dense forest. Picture an old farmhouse built around 1863, deep in the German countryside, 70 kilometers north of Munich. There lived the Gruber family. Andreas Gruber, a reclusive patriarch, his frail wife Cecilia, their widowed daughter Victoria Gabriel, and her 2 small children. Victoria had lost her husband in World War I, and rumors swirled in the village that something dark had stalked her family even before this night. In March of 1922, they took on a new maid, Maria Baumgartner, not knowing that by moonrise she would be thrust into the most terrifying night of her life. Life on Hinterkaifeck had been quiet, bordering on eerie. Local children reported that Victoria often sang hymns softly at dusk, and even the farm dog would sometimes howl at night, as if sensing something amiss. The Grubers were not wealthy, but they were respected farmers, and by all accounts, nothing in their lives should have foretold the nightmare about to unfold. Long before the blood was shed, the farm seemed haunted by strange portents. 6 months before the murders, the previous maid quit suddenly, telling neighbors she heard voices and footsteps in the attic and that the house was haunted. Andreas himself began noticing impossible things. One morning in late February, he found fresh footprints in the snow leading from the deep forest to a locked door at the back of the barn, but there were no tracks leading away. Who could have left those tracks, and where did they go? Around the same time, a newspaper from distant Munich appeared on the porch, though none of the family had subscribed to it. Whispers in the village grew. People said Andreas complained of footsteps overhead late at night. One evening, just days before the slaughter, Victoria and Andreas both claimed they heard slow, deliberate footsteps coming from the attic. They rushed upstairs to look, and found nothing. One neighbor recalled Andreas standing outside in the snow, bewildered by the prints stopping at his door. It was as if someone or something was watching them from within the very walls. The family dismissed offers of help and didn't report any of this to the police. They joked about pranks at first, but their eyes told a different story. Fear was growing in that lonely farmhouse. Strangest of all, one schoolboy later recalled little Cecilia Gabriel telling him her mother had run off into the forest the night before the killings and was found hours later. A story that didn't make any sense. Victoria, of course, was still home. Yet even children seemed half believing that the Grubers were under some curse. Friday, March 31st, 1922, dawned like any other cold spring day. That afternoon, the new maid, Maria Baumgartner, arrived at Hinterkaifeck and settled in for her first shift. By evening, the household was asleep in their small rooms. Then something moved outside. Late that night, as the fire dimmed and the wind howled around the isolated farm, a murderer struck. In the total darkness, each member of the family was lured out one by one to the barn. Andreas and Cecilia Gruber were taken first, summoned by some irresistible noise. There, a blunt farm tool, a mattock, like a pickaxe from their own supplies, was used to hit them mercilessly in the head. Victoria and her daughter Cecilia suffered the same fate, brutally killed in the straw of the barn. It was so violent that after the frenzy, the bodies were left stacked in a heap, as if the attacker wanted to hide them. The youngest child, Josef, was killed in his bassinet upstairs, and finally, the maid Maria was struck down in her bedroom with the same weapon. There was no scream heard. The only witness to the carnage was the farm's dog, who on that night remained eerily silent. When morning came, a pair of grim piles lay in the barn, and silence hung over the farm like a shroud. Four days passed without a single word from Hinterkaifeck. Neighbours knew the family attended church on Sundays, yet they never appeared. Concern grew. On April 1st, 2 local deliverymen knocked on the door, but no answer came. They poked around the yard. The gate to the machine house was curiously ajar, but nobody was there. Even a village mechanic came by to repair an engine on April 4th, and after an hour of waiting, with no one answering inside, left perplexed. The stove was still warm, fresh bread was gone, and someone had clearly fed the livestock, yet the family had vanished. It was only that afternoon when neighbour Lorenz Schlittenbauer and 2 others braved the farmyard. They found the barn doors locked. One account says Schlittenbauer had to break in. Inside were 4 bodies, Andreas and Cecilia Gruber, their daughter Victoria, and little Cecilia Gabriel. They were face down in the straw, huddled together. Stunned, the men then realised the other 2 victims must be inside the farmhouse. In the living room, they discovered Josef and the maid Maria, lying side by side. The toddler and his caretaker had been killed where they slept. It was a scene from the darkest nightmare. 6 lifeless bodies, silence, and no clue as to who or what had done this. Police poured in, but the crime scene was already a disaster. Curious neighbours had wandered through, even lighting the oven to cook. Days-old meals sat on the table. Stranger still, the farmhouse fireplace had been used during the blackout days. The official records note the killer lived with the 6 corpses for 3 days, unafraid. A bloody mattock was finally found years later, hidden in the attic rafters when the barn was dismantled, and a blood-stained pocket knife was discovered in the hay. But fingerprints, none. Detectives searched for human suspects, but each lead went cold. Lorenz Schlittenbauer, Victoria's on-again, off-again boyfriend and the only one with a key to the house, acted suspiciously after the murders, even unlocking the front door that the others could not. He claimed he was looking for little Josef, whom he believed was still alive. Others pointed fingers at itinerant farmhands and vagrants, but money and valuables were untouched. A local Freikorps member, Karl Gabriel, was still declared dead. Even his body was missing from World War I, yet whispers said he might have survived and returned for revenge. Investigators even tore down the farm in 1923, finding the Gruber's own mattock with dried blood hidden above, but to this day nobody could identify the murderer. Through it all, the strangest clues remained the most telling. Neighbours reported more odd events. One passerby, Michael Pluckel, went by the farm 3 days after the murders and saw its oven burning late at night. a lantern-wielding figure stepped from the darkness, blinding him before he hurried on, and the smoke smelled horrible. On April 1st at 3 a.m., a local butcher spotted two shadowy figures skulking at the edge of the woods across from Hinterkaifeck. When they saw him, they vanished into the blackness. Even in 1927, rumours persisted. A stranger in town once drunkenly confessed, "I am the Hinterkaifeck murderer," then bolted back into the forest. Meanwhile, the farmstead itself took on a sinister reputation. There were reports of lights flickering in the empty house on moonless nights. Some villagers avoided the area altogether. Hunters camped nearby described an overwhelming sense of dread. They swore the forest felt alive in an unnatural way. Over the years, the story warped into legend. Some claimed the land was cursed. Some said evil walked through those pine trees. In fact, police files noted that even in 1922, people whispered about ghosts of the attic. To this day, some locals half joke that the Hinterkaifeck killer was never truly human, just something far more sinister lurking beyond understanding. And that is the chilling truth of Hinterkaifeck, a place where history and horror have become inseparable. A century later, the murders remain unsolved, and the whispers from those woods still echo with unanswered questions. Was this the work of a human killer, or something that has never left the farm? Hinterkaifeck, where the line between man and monster disappears in the shadows of the pines.
Every story has an end, but here, the mysteries never stop. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey into the unknown. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's plenty more waiting for you. We drop 3 new stories every week, so if you crave suspense, the unexplained and the downright chilling, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's next. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, some stories stay with you long after they're told.